Hello, everyone, and welcome to this next edition of the Planning for Retirement podcast, where we help educate you on how retirement works. This is episode number 48, Downsizing to Retire Early. Today, we're going to talk about some of the reasons that people downsize in order to fund their retirement or retire earlier than they had initially planned. And we're also going to talk a little bit about the tax implications of doing so. For those of you who are new around here, my name is Kevin Lau. I'm your host. I've been a financial advisor the last 16 years, helping people prepare for and execute a successful retirement. And the goal of this podcast is to educate and empower you to achieve financial security. I'm also the owner of Imagine Financial Security, which is an independent financial planning and investment advisory firm, still registered in Florida, by the way, but currently working on my registration in Tennessee. And this information, just a full disclosure, is for educational purposes only and should not be used as investment, legal, or tax advice. All right, everyone. What a week we've just had. I'm recording this on Wednesday, July 17th. Just days after former President Donald Trump was almost assassinated. And I don't care what side of the political aisle you sit on, this was a tragic day in American history, period. And thank God that President Trump turned his head slightly at the right moment to avoid the unthinkable. And I just pray that whoever is in office, beginning in 2025, can try to unify this country. And I really personally don't believe we are as divided as many think. Many people, especially millennials and Gen Zers for sure, get their news from social media. It's just the reality of how things are and living in 2024. And honestly, that number is even growing more for baby boomers and Gen Xers. And I just wanted to just share with those of you who are not familiar, the dangers of the algorithm of social media is that it pushes content with a higher number of likes and comments to the top. So that's the content you are seeing. And social media, at least to my knowledge, doesn't have a great way, it doesn't have a bulletproof way to eliminate fake accounts or bots at this point in time. Now, over time, they can find out, hey, this is a bot account, we eliminated it. But at the time, when a piece of content is out there and it's getting likes and engagement from bots, people, essentially accounts that you believe are real people that are just robots, that are AI. And this content is being pushed to the top, and that's what you're seeing. Listen to this quote here from an article from NPR that was dated on July 9th, so literally a couple of weeks ago. The U.S. Department of Justice said it disrupted a Russian propaganda campaign using fake social media accounts powered by AI to spread disinformation in the U.S. and other countries. Here's another snippet from NPR, but this is from 2023. China is stepping up their efforts to manipulate people in other countries on social media, becoming the third most common source of foreign influence operations behind Russia and Iran, according to Meta, which is Facebook's parent company. So I share this with you because, for those of you that believe that America is so divided on issues, I know I mentioned, hopefully the future president can unite our country, but I don't believe we're as divided as the media wants us to think. Most Americans, from my perspective, fall somewhere in the moderate area, maybe plus or minus a standard deviation or two. Maybe a standard deviation a little bit more leaning towards the right or leaning towards the left. But certainly the majority of people are not on the far left and not on the far right. And I believe this is the curse of social media. One of the several curses I believe on social media is that people go in on social media, they see a particular a piece of content that is political, and they'll go into the comment section and they will read what quote unquote people are saying, when in fact these are not even real people. And sometimes these are not even Americans. Okay. Even if they are real people, they're Russians or Chinese or Iranians. They're not Americans. Okay. And so I just share this with you because of what just transpired over this past week. I just could not get on this recording and not address it. And I just, my thoughts and prayers go out to the families that did lose a loved one. I just pray for those individuals and those family members for healing. And I just pray that we can come together for this election, regardless of who wins, that we can accept whoever wins and we can accept the leadership of this country, move forward, and just work together to make America the greatest country on the planet, keep America the greatest country on this planet. Okay. Because this is what all of us who immigrated from other countries wanted to achieve the American dream. And my goal for my boys is I want to preserve the American dream. Now, the American dream probably looks a little differently today in 2024 than it did back in, let's say, 1954. But nonetheless, I want to preserve our democracy. I want to preserve the freedoms that we have. And to that, I just pray for the leaders of this country going forward. So last episode, we talked about relocating in retirement. And many of you plan to do so for the reasons we talked about, but moving isn't fun. Okay. Have any of you moved recently? It's not ideal. Okay. We've made a nice dent over the last 2 weeks, but we're still swimming in boxes. And some of you are living in the home that you raised your children in for the last 30 to 40 years. And you might even have memories as your children have become adults and they've had children. And you've had countless memories of family and friends gathering in your home. Maybe you have a beautiful garden that you work in daily and you cannot imagine leaving it and starting over. So there's an emotional attachment to your home. You know, the last home that we were in only for the last 3.5 years, but those memories that we made with our boys over the last 3.5 years are priceless memories. And, you know, I remember moving into that house when our twins were a month old. Our oldest son was 17 months old. So not an ideal time to move. Okay. Hopefully those of you that are planning for retirement do not have 3 kids under the age of 2 years old. But nonetheless, it was not an ideal time to move, but we've had so many memories in that house. And it was an emotional week or two for me, personally, leaving that home. And so I completely empathize with those of you who love the home you're in and have made so many memories in that home that you live in. But you might be looking at your retirement plans and feeling like you're maybe a little bit behind, or you're kind of treading water a little bit, you know, but you want to be in a position to fire your boss so you can play more golf or travel the world or spend more time with your family. And, you know, the markets have, for better or worse, traded sideways for the last couple of years in 2022 and 2023. 2022, we had a down year, of course. In 2023, we had a positive year. And we're starting to see some all-time highs again in 2024. But still, you know, inflation is embedded into our economy at this point in time. And the concerns around, you know, potentially muted returns in the stock market and the bond markets going forward, coupled with inflation, you know, might have you wondering a little bit if you're actually on track to maintain your standard of living during retirement. You know, and there's also so much uncertainty with taxes and of course politics, this being an election year, with healthcare, with Social Security. You know, many of you that I speak to day in and day out are worried about the future. Okay. And let me just say, I've worked with dozens of retirees who relocated in retirement to an entirely new state, you know, some even to a new country. And some of them sold their home and just simply bought a new home in the same city they lived in and you know, kind of did the traditional downsize. Right. So some retire and downsize, some relocate to a new city and state completely. But this topic made me think of a client who we currently work with who did both. They sold their longtime residence and retired to Florida. You know, they did this for several reasons: warmer weather, no state income taxes, being near the beach, lower cost of living. So many of the same reasons we talked about in our last episode. You know, and the lower cost of living for them also involved a housing arbitrage. And what I mean by that is the house they sold was in a very high cost of living area in the Washington, D.C. area, which is where I'm from. And the price per square foot in that area, let's say, was roughly $400 a square foot. Well, the area they moved to in Florida had a price per square foot closer to $175 a square foot. So what this meant is they could sell their home, they could pay off their mortgage, they could buy a new home with cash, brand new, by the way, a new build, new construction, and they still had money left over, okay, to invest for the retirement. And before they proceeded with that plan, they consulted with me and my firm at the time and helped to map out the best plan of action. And they had done well saving and investing. Okay. But retiring in the Washington, D.C. area with a mortgage still on their balance sheet, that was impacting their ability to travel and do the things they want to do. And ultimately the timing of retirement. Okay. So when I met with them initially, we modeled a scenario of relocating and downsizing their primary home. And trust me, it was very emotional, okay? Because that home that they were planning to sell, that they ultimately did sell, that was the home that they had made all of their memories in with their children, even their grandchildren that were local to them. But selling that property from a financial perspective, they could take $400,000 of net capital proceeds and buy a new home outright with cash. This was back in 2020. So this was really pre-COVID boom in the Florida real estate market. And so that meant they had no mortgage, but they also had an additional $200,000 to deploy as an after-tax investment account to pad their 401ks and their Roth accounts. Okay, so for those of you that don't know, an after-tax investment account has no restrictions on how much you can contribute. Okay, unlike a Roth IRA, unlike a 401k. Okay, as well as when you can access those funds. So for those of you that plan on retiring, let's say before 59 and a half, the after-tax brokerage account is one of the most underrated investment vehicles that people are utilizing today. Most people have very to little, if no money, in a taxable investment account. The majority of the funds are in a tax-deferred IRA or tax-deferred 401k plan. And these are going to be more restrictive in terms of when you can access those dollars. So if you plan to retire early in your 50s, you might have some challenges there. If taxes go up in the future, you potentially might have some challenges there unless you have a solid Roth conversion plan, unless you're balancing out tax-free money with tax-deferred money. Okay. Instead of parking the dollars in a high yield savings account, which at the time was paying next to nothing, we put it into a very well diversified, very well thought out investment portfolio, combination of stocks, bonds, mutual funds in order to supplement the retirement income. So for them, instead of waiting another 5 years to retire, they were in a position to retire in 2020 and move to Florida. Boom. Win-win situation. Now, do they miss their friends? Yes. Do they miss their family? Probably. Do they miss their home? Absolutely. So all of the above. I mean, all of those things that you would think when you're selling a home that you've lived in for decades, all of those emotions are going to be, at the top. Okay. But if you live in a high cost area and financially it's not feasible to stay there forever, or potentially you might have to work another 10 to 15 years, and maybe you want to retire in your early 50s. Okay, so you can pursue your dream retirement while your health is still intact. Nothing is guaranteed. Just because Social Security, the latest delaying age is age 70, doesn't mean you should wait to retire until 70. That's no guarantee. Okay, and I'm not sure about you, but watching an 85-year-old swing a golf club is a little bit depressing to me. Okay, I want to have the freedom and the time to play my bucket list golf courses in my 40s, in my 50s, in my 60s. Right. So I better get to it personally. But, the last 4 years, I haven't golfed much at all, building this business and, raising our three boys, having three under the age of 2, for, a year. And then, just having little ones. It's just hard to play golf. It's hard to justify, hey, babe, I know you've been watching the boys all week, as being a stay-at-home mom, but hey, this Saturday I'm going to go golfing and it's going to take 6 hours. It's going to be 2 hours of travel time and warm-up time and 4 hours to play. That's a hard sell, right? I think this year I've logged 2 rounds. I fired an 83 at Atlantic Beach Country Club and then a 78 at St. John's Golfing Country Club, both in the Jacksonville area. Love both of those courses. And I want to be playing my best golf when I hit up Bandon Dunes in Oregon, or I hit up Scotland and play Royal Troon. By the way, who else is excited about the Open this week? I'm so sad and shocked that it's the last major of the year, but it's been a fun major season. And, when you're listening to this, the results are going to be out. But I'm pulling for Rory to bounce back after that heartbreak at the US Open. I really am. So I'm excited to watch this week, but I digress. The benefit of being in those high cost areas is that your home value is likely the largest, if not one of the largest assets on your balance sheet. And sure, you could leave it alone and you could leave that asset to your kids when you pass away, but what's the fun in that? How is that really contributing to your enjoyment during your lifetime? It's not. Okay. So maybe your plan is running a little tight. Maybe you'd like a little bit of a buffer that's liquid, right? And, to give you some added peace of mind. And you've got that home equity. Why not realize some of that home equity growth and redeploy it into your retirement portfolio as a liquid investment, not an illiquid asset? Okay. This could be the difference for you retiring at 60 instead of 70. Imagine having 10 years of your retirement back doing things you actually want to do when you want to do them. Okay. So food for thought on that one. But what about taxes? Why not get hammered? This is usually a question that we get is what is going to be the tax implication? Well, the good news is there is a section in the IRS tax code called Section 121. Okay, so how might you qualify for Section 121? Well, it's got to be your primary residence. Okay, number one, it cannot be a rental property or an investment property. Okay, and there are two different tests, the ownership and the use tests. Okay, and the ownership test is that it's essentially just verifying that you've owned the home for at least 2 out of the last 5 years before the sale. And then the use test essentially is confirming that you've lived in that home as your primary residence for at least 2 out of the last 5 years. Okay. So these 2 years do not have to be consecutive. It's any time within the last 5 years. As long as you meet the ownership and the use test, it's likely that you can exclude up to $250,000 if you're single and up to $500,000 if you're married. So how do you calculate the gain on the sale? Okay. Well, you got to figure out what the sales price is. Now, obviously the home has to be sold. So if it hasn't been sold yet, you can run a little projection and say, hey, what do I believe I can get if I put my house on the market? Then you subtract the adjusted basis of the home, okay, which is essentially the original purchase price plus any capital improvements made during the ownership. So if you renovated the kitchen and you put $50,000 in there, maybe you bought the home for $500,000 and you put another $50,000 in renovations over the those couple of years. Well, now your basis is $550,000 as opposed to $500,000. Okay. Then you want to also deduct any costs associated with selling the home, like real estate commissions or advertising fees and legal fees. And then the result is your gain from the sale. Okay. So again, the maximum exclusion amount is up to $250,000 if single, $500,000 if married, filing jointly. Okay. And so if you look at your calculated gain, okay, after you deduct those expenses and after you add back any capital improvements, then we can figure out, hey, so you have to report this on Schedule D on Form 1040, and you're going to report the sale of your home as a capital gain or capital loss, and you're going to indicate if the gain is excluded under Section 121. So if, let's say, you calculate your gain, you're married filing jointly, and you sold the property for $1 million, and your adjusted basis is $500,000, minus any expenses for, realtor expenses, closing costs, etc. Let's say that was another $50,000. Well, now you have a $450,000 gain that you can exclude fully, assuming you're married filing jointly. But you still have to report that sale of your home on Schedule D, and you're just going to indicate that the gain is excluded under Section 121. Most likely you might receive Form 1099-S, and these are essentially proceeds from real estate transactions. And again, you're going to be reporting the sale even if it is tax exempt under Section 121. There are some other nuances here as well. There are some other forms that you need to be aware of. There's also some documentation that you should be aware of as well. And there are also some unique circumstances that might allow for a partial exclusion. Okay, so there are several things that are a little bit more nuanced, a little bit more specific. And so what we're going to do is we've created a downloadable PDF that gives you a little step-by-step guide of who can exclude, little bit about Section 121, who can exclude the taxes on the sale of a primary residence, and also step-by-step to make sure that you're doing it the right way. So if you're interested in that guide, we're going to put a link in the show notes to download it. I'm still working on logistically how that's going to work. But again, look for the show notes and look for that downloadable guide inside there as well. So in short, if you're planning for retirement and you're feeling like your home equity could help add to or pad your retirement plans, you should absolutely consult with a financial professional and a tax professional to see what your options are. And don't make the mistake that many retirees make, where they completely ignore their home equity as an asset on their balance sheet. Many just think, hey, I'm just going to leave this as an asset to my kids, which is all well and good. But if your home equity could be a tool to use to improve the quality of your life in retirement, to maintain financial independence longer, to prevent ever being a burden on your loved ones, or to potentially allow you to retire earlier than you had initially anticipated, this could be a strong consideration to really look at this. And listen, I do believe this is a big reason that many retirees underspend substantially in retirement, is because they don't take advantage of all of the assets on their balance sheet. So if you're interested, and if you're interested in consulting with an advisor one-on-one, if you're interested in working with me one-on-one, we are still adding clients for 2024. And so if you're interested in working with me one-on-one, you can fill out our retirement readiness questionnaire. This link is going to be in the show notes. I will then follow up with personalized feedback on how you're tracking for financial independence, as well as specific opportunities where we could add more value if we were to work together. If you simply want to stay informed with all of our retirement planning insights, make sure to follow the podcast, of course, but also you can subscribe to my newsletter, and we're going to link that in the show notes as well. And if you're finding value in our content, awesome. We appreciate that. And you're also liking the fact that it's free and we have no commercials, even better. Just make sure, again, to follow the show wherever you're consuming podcasts and share this with one friend who's in a similar boat as you. I appreciate all of you doing so. It helps us a ton. Next time, I'm going to be trying something a little bit new. I'm going to be doing what I'm going to call a whiteboard retirement plan. And so I'm going to pick a case that we've worked on over the last, couple of months or maybe even couple of years. We'll see. And we're going to do a retirement plan breakdown on a whiteboard. So you're not going to want to miss that. And that's another thing. We are posting the videos of our show on both Spotify and on YouTube. So follow on Spotify, follow on YouTube if you want to see the video version. And specifically for these whiteboard retirement plans, you're not going to want to miss that. So until next time, this is Kevin Lau signing off.